Welcome to Always Authors, the literary podcast that presents two authors in candid conversation. On this episode, we are proud to present award-winning authors Natasha Lester and Priya Parmar. Natasha is the New York Times bestselling author of several novels, including The Paris Seamstress, The Paris Orphan, and The Mademoiselle Alliance. Her new novel, The Chateau on Sunset, is a reimagining of Jane Eyre set in the infamous Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles. Priya is the author of the novels Exit the Actress and Vanessa and Her Sister, a New York Times notable book, as well as the co-author of the musical Sylvia, which was nominated for an Olivier Award for Best Original Musical. Her newest novel, The Original, focuses on the extraordinary life of Katharine Hepburn. Listen in as they discuss old Hollywood, why they don't outline their books because it ruins all the fun, and visiting the mind-blowing prop room at Warner Brothers. Inspiration starts now.
Hello.
Hi, um, I'm Priya Parmar.
And I'm Natasha Lester. It's great to be here today with you. We have never actually spoken or met officially, and here we are chatting on a podcast for the first time.
That's true. I read your work, but we have never met. So it is lovely to meet you.
Yeah, lovely to meet you as well, and lovely to have read your book and to have kind of, I guess, virtually met you on Instagram, but it's much nicer to be here, kind of in the flesh, but yeah.
Very true. Very true. Very true. Um, yes,
So your book came out a month ago, is that right? Are you celebrating almost the 1 month anniversary of the original coming out?
I'm just about at the 1 month mark of the book coming out in the U.S. I'm about to
Yes.
start the UK leg in a couple of weeks. So
Oh,
I'm at the
amazing.
marathon sprint. And we're at the same US publishing house. We're both at Ballantine.
Yes, which is fantastic. This is only my second book with them, and they're fabulous. But what I really wanted to ask you about when I was reading the original, so obviously, I guess for listeners, the original is kind of a biofiction, I guess you could say, about Katharine Hepburn, the incredible Hollywood actress. But the thing that I really wanted to know was, have you had like a lifelong fascination with Katharine, or is it a more recent obsession? I really wanted to find out like where the Katharine Hepburn interest came from and how long you've had it for.
I've been obsessed with her, for years. But
Okay,
I
I
didn't.
could feel that in the book,
Yeah,
which
I've
I
been obsessed
loved.
with her for years. I don't know if you feel like this, but I can't write something really well unless I'm genuinely
Yeah,
obsessed,
yeah.
unless I'm so far down the rabbit hole that there's no chance of my writing anything else because I just, you know, only want to read about her and only want to, just that unless the research really consumes me. That's kind of my happy writing place. But do you feel
Yeah.
like that? Do you feel like you
Yeah,
get
definitely. And when I was reading the book, I thought, I feel like you must have been a huge fan of hers for a really long time because you could feel that love in the writing and in the book. I didn't think it was something that was a recent sort of fascination that you just developed. It really felt like a lifelong kind of true love of this incredible actress, which I really appreciated feeling that. You know how you can feel in the writing when someone loves what they're writing about? And that was one of the things I most enjoyed about your book, as well as obviously finding out so many things about Catherine that I was not aware of. So thank you.
I'm so glad you felt that way. I felt like when I was reading your gorgeous, Chateau on Sunset, which is, you know, so fascinating to be reading about the same town,
Yes.
sort of the next decade alone, because I'm
Yes. Yeah.
writing about the 30s, early 40s, and you're, into the 50s, and it's just, I mean, it felt like did you spend a lot of time there? I mean, I read that you went there twice, but did you stay for a long
Yeah.
time?
So I stayed at the Marmont twice, and I was in LA probably 3 or 4 times during the research of the book, because it does largely take place at the Chateau Marmont, the
Yeah.
infamous Hollywood hotel, again for listeners, sorry. And you probably feel the same. I don't feel like I can ever write about a place unless I have physically been there. I know that Google Maps exist and, well, in some cases, photographs exist. Although the interesting thing about the Marmont, which you may know, is that they have never allowed photographs there and they still don't allow guests
Yes.
to take
You don't.
photographs inside. So you can't just go online and Google photographs of the Chateau Marmont. When there are some people do kind of try and take sneaky snaps
Yeah.
when they're there, but largely you can't get really good photographs. So you've really got to go there and walk the halls and hang out and suffer for your art by staying at the Chateau Marmont.
Well, it also just felt like I felt like you must have spent time there because the way, the first time we see her, when the after you have that original time jump in the beginning and she's running down the stairs, you know the internal layout so well. You know what I mean? It feels like you really must have done, reconnaissance work in there to get to know
Yeah. I went with
what
my daughter, and she was probably 19 at the time. And
oh my
we
God.
just literally stuck our noses into every nook and cranny of that hotel. Every time there was a staircase, we were like, do you think we're allowed to go up here? And then we were like, who cares? Let's go up there anyway. So we
And
had a
did they
fabulous time. There were No, I didn't tell them I was writing a book because they have the no photographs policy. I wasn't sure how they would respond to that. And they had been so lovely to us. I thought they might treat us like, you know, look down their noses at us because we're nobodies compared to a lot of the sorts of people that stay there. But they were just the most incredible staff. So we didn't want to kind of push the
oh,
friendship by revealing the book. So we just did sneaky
way.
reconnaissance. Yeah.
Oh,
There were only two
amazing.
places we couldn't get to, which was the turret. You couldn't get up there. And that was the one place I really wanted to go and have a look. So I had to really just invent the turret. And we couldn't get into the penthouse, obviously. That might have been
Yeah.
pushing the friendship to knock on the door and to say, could I just have a peek inside? But everywhere else we went, which was super fun.
Amazing. Amazing, amazing.
Oh,
And it's
but
also felt like you
sorry.
were obsessed with it's also felt like you were obsessed with Jane Eyre.
Oh,
You must have been
yes.
the way that it's embedded in the
Yes.
story, you know.
Yeah, so I know I wanted to reimagine Jane Eyre because I read Jane Eyre for the first time when I was 10. I don't know whether you have a
Oh,
classic
wow.
that you read at a really young age that really stayed with you in a certain way. I remember when Emerald Fennell was talking about her Wuthering Heights adaptation, and she talked about, I think she read it slightly later than 10, maybe she was 14, she said. And she said that she made the movie that was like the fever dream that she had back as a teenage girl reading the book for the first time. And I could really relate to that because I had a similar impression of Jane Eyre as a 10-year-old. The things I remembered from that reading were, this concept of this mad woman in the attic, which in all the kind of horse and pony books that I'd read up until then, I had not encountered, and the fires and the stabbings and all the really dark gothic things like that. So I feel like if I made a movie version based on what my 10-year-old self felt about Jane Eyre, it might end up being similar to her movie version of Wuthering Heights, although probably minus the quantity of eggs that were destroyed in the making of her movie. I don't know whether you've seen it.
I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard about the eggs.
Yes, you can't forget the eggs. Yeah,
I've heard.
so it was kind of fun just when I decided to write this sort of loose reimagining of Jane Eyre and set it at the Chateau Marmont, I also thought, wow, this is a really great way to get to spend 2 or 3 years just thinking about my favorite book. Which, who doesn't want to spend 2 or 3 years just thinking about their favorite book? So, yeah, so it was super fun. And I also just had this sense of dissatisfaction, I guess, even though I love Jane Eyre, the fact that she was such a bold, brave feminist heroine And there are so many times in that book where she talks about yearning to explore the world, and she never had the
Yes.
chance to explore the world. And so I thought,
Yeah.
okay, well, what if in my reimagining, I give her that chance that I feel like she truly deserves? So it was a little bit of
Yeah.
that as well. But talking about bold, brave feminist heroines, obviously, we've got our fabulous Catherine Hepburn. And one of the things I really also enjoyed about your book was the way that you bring her to life in terms of showing us all the wonderful things about her, but also the flaws that she had as well, and
Yeah.
and how complicated she was. And I wanted to find out from you whether there was like a particular trait of hers that you really admired and you really wanted to make sure you got onto the page, and whether there was a particular flaw of hers that was the most interesting for you to explore, because I just thought you did that balance really well.
Oh, thank you. This is one of those things where it would be really good if I outlined. You know what I mean? If I
Yeah,
had a plan.
same.
Um, I don't. So you don't outline either.
No, I just
I don't
can't. It
outline.
ruins the fun. I always
That's
think it would
exactly
be
what
really good to be able to do it, but then I don't know.
I feel like. So I've tried it, and I
Yeah,
felt like I got to the end of the story, and it was like a soda where you'd shaken it and all the fizz had gone. Do you know what I mean? It
a
was sort of
hundred
flat. It was
percent.
over. I had gotten to the end and I wasn't interested in the story anymore. So the way that I need to do it is I need to kind of earn my way through it.
Mm,
I can only ever see, you know, a few steps ahead. So I do all of this crazy amounts of research and then I just really hope a character is going to show up and be
mm,
whole and complete and I hope they're going to start talking and I hope they're going to, decide that they want to live in my brain, but I have no control over it. It's sort of like you cook the dinner and then you're like, is anyone coming? Are they going to show up? And she did, which was lovely, but you have no
oh,
guarantee. So in terms
mm,
of flaws, I was doing all this research and I was like, oh my God, that's terrible. Oh my God, that's, awful that she did this and awful that she did that. And yet so amazingly compelling because she
mm,
was just unafraid to say what she genuinely thought. And it made me realize how
yeah.
often I had gone around not necessarily saying exactly what I thought. Not that I think it's a great plan. So I did this research and I went to the town where she lived in Old Saybrook, and everybody has a story. And someone was talking about how they had a friend who was painting a fire hydrant, and she was on her bike and she pulled over her bike and she got off and she was like, that fire hydrant, it can't be green, fire hydrants are red, change it immediately. You know what I mean? So I think she was really outspoken and really, much more than I would ever be, but just it's a fascinating way for her to have lived her life, and she made
Mm,
so many unbelievably interesting mistakes, that I never
yes,
associated with her because
yes,
I, I I sort of came at her when I first started reading about her. I thought she'd somebody who'd never put a foot wrong. She'd stayed on top
yes,
her whole life. No,
yeah.
she put all the feet wrong all the time and
Mm.
got into terrible trouble, and that was what was so interesting. But it's
Yeah,
yeah,
it's funny, isn't it, how we have these perceptions of these actors and actresses because we see them on the screen and they look so
yeah,
perfect, and then everything else that's going on behind them is so different to how they are on the screen. And it really made me conscious reading your book and doing the research for mine how much we accept is true because we see it on a screen. Oh,
yes, yes. And didn't you find that Los Angeles itself, I mean, I stopped my research earlier than your book started because
mm,
I didn't want a later version of LA because LA was changing so much during this time in my head. But did you find, because this is what I found, it's that it's not the town that I thought it was at all. It's a
yes.
very different city than I had expected to find.
Yeah,
Did you find?
absolutely. I did. And I think I really, it really fascinates me in some ways, maybe because I'm from Australia and we are quite classless in Australia, although obviously class exists everywhere. But certainly from doing a lot of the research around Hollywood over that time, it really felt like a system where the social levels were very structured and it was very hard for you to move. And this, it wasn't even so much that they were constructed around social kind of mores. It was your position at a studio would largely dictate your gender, would largely dictate where you kind of were in that pecking order. And the way that the Hays Code, the production code
Yep.
ruled Hollywood, like a lot of that sort of kind of morphed into that as well, and how much people had to hide in order to be able to maintain their position in
Yeah.
whatever social level they had reached. And I had always thought of, every time I go to Los Angeles, I feel like it's very much like Perth, the city where I'm from. It's quite casual, quite laid back, very beachy. But then everything I was looking at in the research for back then gave me a very different impression of it. It wasn't quite so casual or laid back in the Hollywood kind of studio system. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It that absolutely makes sense, and also the stratification, absolutely, that rings so true for me, because you were this is a time when the studio was controlling people so on such a granular level.
Yes.
They were creating a biography for them. They were
Yeah.
presenting them,
Telling you
they
who
were
you could
just
date or marry or,
they
yeah.
were all up in it, in their lives. And so because my book straddles the time just before the code came in and just
Of
after
course. Yes. Yes.
it's so interesting because I got to see the world that disappeared
Mm,
and then the world that
yes.
that came in. And so the world that disappeared was just so, and it disappears sort of right in the middle of my novel.
Mm,
It's so free and progressive,
yes.
and you know just everybody is, it wasn't uncommon to be, this is my girlfriend and this is my boyfriend and that's my husband over there, and that would sort of not be an uncommon arrangement, and the press was in on it and everyone knew everything, but because it was this closed ecosystem, it didn't get out to the country at large. But once it started to get out, that's when everything kind of clamped down. But it's so interesting to me, that I didn't know anything about that world. I only knew about the sort of
Yes.
the later like the later world. It's
Mm,
that earlier world just got kind of erased. Um,
yes. It's
yeah, and
interesting, isn't it, when you think about the way the code policed morality. Like you can almost see some contemporary resonances there, actually.
absolutely.
Thinking about that now, I hadn't actually occurred to me until just then. It was like, wow, where are we moving into the era of the Hollywood production code, but applied to the world at large all over again? I don't know.
Yeah, because it's a retrofitting of morals and sort of,
Yes,
imposing it on your life in a and not your morals, an
yes,
externally applied set of morals that aren't didn't belong to them. So it was a
yeah,
really, in a really oppressive
yes,
way. And so it's an interesting town to be looking at. And at the same time, it's held up for the rest of the country as this sort of very beautiful, very glam, very, and you
yes,
were really examining that kind of, that that underside of the glam, um, in a way, in a really personal, small, like, using these three lives. It was just it. Yeah, I found it incredibly sad. How much
mm,
we've sort of collectively forgotten, um,
yes, yeah.
about
I
how
mean,
progressive it
I
was.
suppose, one of the things that most struck me when I was looking into all of those, what happened to a lot of the women at that
Yeah.
time, which obviously you are very interested in as well in your book, and how many of their stories get presented nowadays in non-fiction books as
Yeah.
either completely partly erased or kind of funny when they're not funny.
Yeah.
The Natalie Wood story is the one that just
God,
blows my mind. I guess for
I
listeners who maybe
find
not
that
familiar
like,
with that, isn't
oh
it
my
just
God.
awful?
So
Especially
Natalie
her
Wood,
life thereafter. Yeah. I
the
mean,
fact
so
that she
we've got,
also her death is just, I
I
find it.
know,
She
everything
had a
about her life.
fear of
Uh,
drowning her
yeah,
whole
I
life,
know. Totally
and then
tragic. And then that's what happens to her. Well, yeah,
that's what
drowned, who knows? It's a very
I
kind of
I know
the kind of
totally.
secretive circumstances around what happened there, aren't there? But yeah, so you've got, Rebel Without a Cause. The director Nicholas Ray is living in a bungalow at the Chateau Marmont, and he's getting the script written. He's auditioning people for roles in the movie. Obviously, he casts James Dean. Natalie Wood turns up one day at the Marmont because word's gotten out that there's this movie being made and she wants to be a part of it. And she kind of convinces him to give her a role. It's quite a funny story how she convinced him, because he didn't think she was right. He thought, she'd only played very good girl roles until then, and he didn't
Yeah.
feel that she would fit the main female role in Rebel Without a Cause. So she went out and got blindingly drunk with a whole lot of people staying at the Marmont, drove her car, smashed her car, was taken to hospital, and called Nicholas Ray from the hospital saying, the doctor just called me a goddamn juvenile delinquent. Now do I get the part? And I just thought,
Is
oh
that
my
not true?
God, that is true. Can you believe she did that?
I
And he
didn't
gave
know that
gives
was
it a
true.
part. No, isn't that? And so, if you read a book about that movie, you'll read that story because that's kind of funny, even though like it's not really, because she has a car accident and
Yeah.
gets taken to hospital. But anyway, and then you kind of read that then, according to a lot of the non-fiction books, that Nicholas Ray and Natalie Wood then embarked upon what they call a sexual relationship. But I think, come on, he was 43 years old and she was 16 years old. Like, that is not a sexual relationship. That's a really classic example of a man in power taking advantage of a girl. The age of consent in California is 18 at the time. And I just really annoys me, as you can probably tell by how
Yeah.
outraged I'm getting, how those things get presented, decades down the track in a way that just makes it seem like this fun, sexy
Yeah.
Hollywood incident when it's the genesis of what we found out during Me Too, really, I think.
It
Yeah.
is, and it's such a incredibly dark episode, and yet no stigma is attached to that director. You know what I mean? There's no fallout for him, even though
Absolutely
that's
not.
something that's, even by the standards of the day, illegal. You know?
Absolutely. Yep. No, he manages to walk away and she gets told not to speak about it to anybody. It's her secret to keep. And it's like, how does that work? But talking about secrets and Hollywood, one of the things I really was fascinated by is the way you portrayed Catherine's kind of very fluid sexuality. I wasn't fully aware of that, I don't think, until I read your book. And I really wondered how much information was there about that on the historical record? Because I'm thinking in the kind of production code era, how much of that would have been hidden away and swept under the carpet. And so, was it easy for you to access information about that? And how much of it is still around? How easy was that to find?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where, I mean, and you must find this, where you have primary documentation, and then you have secondary documentation, and you have all these biographies, and they can fall. And my background is in, I was originally an academic, and my research is like insane, and I sort of go to the primary documentation, and I mean, I just am,
Yes.
I spend way too long on it, and it becomes somewhere I end up hiding when I'm like afraid to start
Yes.
writing. Terrible. It stops being useful and it starts just being, a hideout. But it it's one of those things where you have biographers on both sides stating it with absolute certainty.
Yeah.
And really, with so much, uh, you know, uh, with so much history, you can't really know. You don't really know what happened
Yeah.
in private. You can just take all of the evidence and then make your best guess. And
Yeah.
looking at all of it and looking at all of the people and who in her own time, her contemporaries, what was said, it seemed like, that was my best guess for what had
Yes.
happened. Um, but that said, you never have any idea of what
No.
it's fiction. But you must
Yeah.
have that where you have to make a call about what
Yeah.
you're gonna say. And I mean, do you stick to history as much as possible, or do you bend it where it needs to be?
It
I
depends.
tie myself in pretzels trying to make it work, or, narratively to make the history work, and I'm like, oh my god, just change
I
the
know.
date.
I know. It's the worst, isn't it? So for me, it depends a little bit. So my previous novel is a book called The Mademoiselle Alliance, and that's my
Yeah.
most biofictional kind of book, I guess. It's a fictionalized account of the only woman to lead a resistance network during the Second World War. And like you, I mean, there was a lot about her life that worked perfectly narratively, which you don't often find. People's lives
No.
often have large, boring parts that you've got to kind of excise or get through or do something with. Whereas, obviously, tragically, being during wartime, there was a lot going on. There was very little time for boredom. Um, but you end up looking at what you've written and thinking, I'm just taking too long to get there because actually 12 months elapsed in this time. But narratively, I can't make that work. And then
Yeah.
I have a group of authors, probably similar to you, who you kind of bounce ideas off. And they always say to me, there's always going to be someone you're going to piss off. So just go for it. And I think that's true. No matter how much if you stick to the historical record, you'll annoy people because maybe they'll be bored because the pacing's off. If you change some dates and you own up to it in the author's note, hopefully most people will forgive you, but there will always
Yeah.
be sticklers to the absolute historical truth because they believe a historical truth exists, which is
Yep.
debatable in and of itself, who will come at you for changing a date or for combining three people into one or something like that. Don't you think?
Yes. I think going into it knowing that someone is not going to be happy and that there are
Yeah.
going to be people who are going to be unhappy is a very helpful way to avoid kind of getting your heart broken. With my last novel, there were people who dressed up. It was about Virginia Woolf and her sister Vanessa Bell and their
Mm,
very complicated, difficult relationship. And
yes.
and Virginia Woolf doesn't always come off well because
Yes.
she
Yep.
atrociously at times, which we
Yep.
know because she kept a diary and they all kept diaries
Diary.
and they all
Yep.
we know, you're not making it up. You behaved really badly. And people would come to readings dressed as Virginia Woolf, ready to yell at me, and I'd be like, I'd see them in the audience and be like, oh God, here it comes. Oh no. you
Oh
know,
my
just
gosh.
you just know it's coming and there's nothing you can do except stand there and just be like, I'm so sorry.
Wow,
Yes,
that
I
is
do.
taking trolling to a whole new level, isn't it?
Oh yeah, people love her. It's when people and I sort of like after that novel, I was like, okay, I'm not going to write about someone that people
Mm,
love obsessively. And of course, I did. I wrote about
yeah.
someone that people love this obsessively. So I'm very much hoping. No, so far, no one's turned up,
No.
ready to yell at me. But it
Dressed up
happens.
as Catherine.
No,
Oh,
coming to get me. But it does. It happens. It's people. And I guess that happens when you care about something so deeply and it's so personal and it's had such meaning to you in your life. Get, you take offense if someone else is gonna, but that's how it goes, and I'm sorry.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
I
I
think
was
apologize
terrified
and
that
say,
people were going to be really upset with me for reimagining Jane Eyre because, again, lots of people
yes,
love Jane Eyre and they would be horrified that I would dare to take on Charlotte Bronte's incredible
yes,
work of fiction. But it's because you love something so much. You know, you love Catherine Hepburn, you love Virginia Woolf. I love Jane Eyre, I love Charlotte Bronte, I love those three amazing
yes,
sisters who produced such brilliance for their
yes,
time. And, you know, that's what's great about fiction is you get to kind of imagine your own way into someone that you love, like Catherine, and look at, okay, well, based on everything I'm reading, what's the most plausible and likely scenario that feels true to me? And there isn't ever one real, only Catherine knows what the real true version was, and she's not around to ask. So,
no,
yeah.
that's exactly right. So did you start with the idea of it's going to be Jane Eyre, or did you start, it's going to be a re-understanding of Jane Eyre, or did you start with the idea that it's going to be the story that it ultimately became? Which one did you know? Okay, it's going to be Los Angeles. It's going to be, or did you know? Which one came first? How did it start? Because the character of
So,
of Aria is so, or is it Aria or Aria? How do you say it? Is it how
whichever
do you
way,
say
I
it?
say aria, but that could be Australian accent. I don't
No,
know.
no, you never know. But you say it one way in your head, so
Yeah.
you never know. So it's
Yes.
Aria. Okay. But
Um,
so how did
I guess
which
it, the idea to reimagine Jane Eyre kind of occurred to me when I was doing a bit of brainstorming about what my next idea was. And at this almost the next moment, I don't know, it's one of those amazing things that happens. I always think your brain has all these things stored in it that are potential book ideas, but they're not enough on their own. And something has to happen for your brain to go connect these two seemingly disconnected things. And now you've got a book idea. And so I'd had the Chateau Marmont just written down in my ideas notebook for a few months, and it wasn't enough. It was a setting, didn't have a story. And I needed a story for it. And then the minute I had this idea of reimagining Jane Eyre, I could see, instead of Rochester's Gothic Thornfield Hall, the very Gothic Chateau Marmont as being
yeah,
the most ideal place for a reimagined Jane Eyre to take place. And so that kind of gave me my time frame, because 50s and 60s was a bit like its heyday, I suppose, over that golden age of Hollywood period. So
yeah,
it all kind of just happened at once, but that didn't mean I knew what the story was necessarily, because like you, I really can't plan a book up front. I have also tried to do that and it killed the story. I had to throw the whole thing out because I ruined it by overthinking it up front. And I think, part of the thrill of the first draft is figuring out what the story is and getting to know these people and giving them this life. And
yeah,
if you've kind of put that down as a plan already, it's not as interesting to then follow it through. I don't know
yeah.
why. Because I'm a very organized person in every area of my life. So I always thought that I would be able to sit down and plan or outline a book up front. But it doesn't work like that for me at all. I think it does have something to do with the fact that I need to be entertained while I'm
Yeah.
writing. And the entertainment comes from discovering the story, right?
Yeah. You need to be surprised, you need to be engaged, you need to
Yes.
be in the same way the reader is. That makes so much sense to me. Do you decide, I'm asking for purely like I have an ulterior motive because I'm currently trying to figure out my next book. But do you figure it out while you're in do you do it while you're writing the book before it, or do you wait and finish everything and then start the next one? Or can you keep two stories in your head? I am incapable of keeping two stories in my head.
Yeah, I can't write a first draft of something and be working on something else at the same time, like a structural edit or something like that. That would not work for my brain. If I'm in the first draft phase, it's just that book. And because I'm always, you know how in a first draft, you have to find the voice, and until you find the voice, it's like very stilted and slow and frustrating, and then you'll suddenly find it, and then you're off and running. And if was working on another book while I'm looking for the voice of, that current book, then I don't think I would ever find it.
It won't happen. Okay, that makes
Yeah.
me feel better.
Yeah.
I'm yeah, it's a weird, I don't know if this happens to you, but when you don't have, when you haven't nailed it down yet, you have this sort of weird unanchored, or I have a weird unanchored feeling when I don't have a manuscript that's in process, when I don't have it underway. It's an uncomfortable feeling, sort of like you don't have another story to go and live in your head. Is
Yes.
how I find it. So I'm just getting onto the runway with my next, thing now, and I'm so homesick for Katharine Hepburn. I don't know if that happens to you. You just get dreadfully homesick for the book you've just written. Um,
Absolutely. Because also it's finished and polished and it's really good,
yes,
whereas the one you're sitting down to write is terrible because it's
awful.
the first draft. And
Yeah,
you just think it's never going to be as good as that last one.
never gonna get to that point. And for me, it's the beginning of a book is it's so uncomfortable until it finds that
Yes.
voice. It's just
Yes.
so it's like shoes that don't fit. It's just everything about it is wrong, and you're like, I can't walk anywhere in these. This is not happening. I need, just I need to start over. But yeah, I definitely have that, and it's so for you it happens and then it takes off, and then do you ever have moments where you doubt the story as you go forward, or is it just a straight
Always.
through? You
No,
do.
yeah, always. I feel like, so once I've found the voice, and
Hmm.
I feel like that happens maybe when I've got about 20,000 words. For some reason, I feel like 20,000 is a bit of a magic number. I don't know whether that's similar for you.
Yes.
And then it flows. And I
Yep.
love that part where you just turn up to your desk every day and your fingers can't type as fast as your brain is going. And that is the
Yes.
best part of writing. And we live for that. That's why we keep turning back
Yes.
up to the desk, right?
Yes.
But then, you get to the edits, the
50,000.
developmental edits, and you're just like, oh my gosh, now I've got to pull this book apart and redo it. And it's not the flow, the joyful flow.
Yeah.
And I often feel like I have written the worst book in the world at that point until I find the flow of the edit, I think. Suddenly
Yeah.
you'll find the structure that your editor knows that you should be able to find, and you do, and then you get into the editorial flow. I guess that's a kind of a different flow as
Yeah.
well. I don't know,
It's a
does that
different
happen with you too?
puzzle. I
Yeah.
have a weird thing where actually this book weirdly I had avoided writing for so long because I was so probably traumatized by the Virginia Woolf people.
Yeah,
But like
I would be too.
I was so afraid to start writing Katharine Hepburn. I didn't know how to start. And I stayed in the
Mm,
research for so long
yeah.
that I finally was like, okay, I'm not leaving this room until I start. And I
Yes.
started, and the first line I wrote is still the first line of the book. That
Mm,
never has happened to me before, where it's just like it came out
mm,
and that's what it was. And that's the first. I don't expect it to ever happen again. And that one it went, but then as always happens, right around the sort of 50,000 words, 50,000 words, I get into it feels like I'm swimming through molasses in the dark,
yeah.
and I
Yeah.
can't, I just can see so, 1 inch in front of my nose, and it's
Mm,
just all feels so hard won. And then you sort of come through the other side, and you're like, okay, now it's back. So I always have a very sticky middle bit, and that always ends up
mm,
being the part that I edit the most.
yeah.
And that's always the bit that needs the most work when I finish. But it's it's a tricky thing, like for me to have this novel have had a different shape rather than the other
Yes.
ones. The other ones, it's always the beginning that was tricky to get into, and then
Yep.
it went. This one, the
Yeah.
beginning, once I finally did it, went, and then the middle, oh my God, stuck. So it was,
Yeah.
but
It's
it's, yeah,
interesting, you saying about the starting line that you wrote and it hasn't changed. So the prologue of the Chateau on Sunset is, as you know, voiced from the point of view of the
yeah.
Chateau Marmont, and that I was having trouble finding the voice of the book, and I went down to my beach house because I'm able to get into the zone of the book when I'm by myself staring at the water. And one thing I love to do when I am stuck is get out a pen and handwrite. And so I sat down on the sofa there looking at the water with my pen in my hand, and I just thought, okay, I'm going to write something crazy. And I started writing this scene from the point of view of the Chateau Marmont. And I had so much fun writing that scene. And I got to the end and thought, this is either completely deranged or it's actually not too bad. And so I put it into the book, and that is probably the one scene in the book that has almost gone through with very minimal changes. It was that handwriting. I just find that there's something different
Amazing.
about the brain's connection to handwriting than it is to typing. I don't know. Do you find that? And do you do much handwriting?
I don't, I wish I need to.
Okay.
I just read a thing that just said, um, a friend of mine sent me this thing that talked about handwriting every day and how it prevents dementia and it does all these things.
Okay.
It engages a different muscle and all of this other stuff. And I have a dear friend who's just written a brilliant book. Their name is Christina Baker Klein, and she just wrote
Oh,
The Foursome.
yes.
Wonderful, and
Yes.
just read it if you haven't. But it's she handwrites her entire, you
Does
know,
she?
first, yeah, it's, I mean,
Oh.
and there's sort of a few of us who spend a week together all writing, and I
Mm,
watch her and I'm just like, oh good God, I just can't, I can't, because my brain doesn't seem to, it doesn't hitch up to my hand when it's handwriting
yeah.
the same way it does when it's typing.
Yep.
And if I had gotten one of those ergonomic keyboards and done all of that stuff I was supposed to do, that would be fine. But I didn't do any of those things. And so I have, repetitive stress this and carpal
Oh,
tunnel that, and all of the things. And I'm like, so handwriting is something I'm like, I'm going to
oh
start, so I
yes.
literally just bought, a friend of mine has this, and she does this. It's a journal that's like, what is it, one line a day, and it's a 5-year journal, and you just are writing,
Oh,
just, whatever it is. And so I'm like, I'm going to start handwriting, and that's literally something I'm planning to start doing. But for her, it does hook up that initial creativity.
yes.
And I've heard that from so many people. So that's something that I
Mm.
try it.
So
But it found it
interesting that
so
she's able to do the whole
the
book by
whole thing.
hand. Like,
The
I
whole
admire that. I would love to do that, but I just feel like it would take me so long to do. Oh my
And I
gosh.
wouldn't be able to read it after I'd finished because my
That's so
handwriting is
true.
atrocious.
Same.
So like there's that problem, which is there. So but yeah, there's a double-edged. I've got to get better at this. But I found it so interesting that you wrote it in the voice of the chateau, because that's obviously I started it and I wrote it in the voice of Los Angeles, and that was such a
Yes, I know.
so interesting that but
Yes.
it's, I think with places that are super evocative and storied and sort of haunted in that way, there's such a, it's lovely. You feel like they do develop a personality.
Oh,
Um, you know,
absolutely. And I remember walking into the Chateau Marmont, and you could feel the history bleeding from the walls. So I think that sensation must have been what made me sit down that day and write that.
yeah,
And same with LA, like it's every street corner, there's a story, right? And so when I was reading your book and reading those sections, I was like, oh my gosh, we've done the same thing. This is crazy in
we've done
terms
the
of
same
taking a
thing.
place and making it sentient. Because LA
Yeah,
is sentient, isn't it?
feel
Right.
like it is. I mean, I feel like it's just, I also, I had, this was the first book I'd ever written in the third person,
Yeah,
in multiple.
okay.
And so
Yes.
I brought in kind of like a Greek chorus, which I thought
Yes.
was so interesting because you had an omniscience as well, in that, in
Yes.
when the it was, there was an omniscience, which is so helpful, especially when you're you know Jane Eyre has such deep interiority. It has such,
Yes.
intense interiority. I feel like you set that up really well, um, by having this, you know, omniscient, go really deep, really early. I thought that was really smart. Um,
It's kind of liberating, isn't it, that omniscient, you know,
it's
because I don't
Yeah,
know, I'm so used to just focalizing through one character and then suddenly to take a step back and go, I can see the whole world. It's like, wow, it's
yes,
like being God.
yes. It's really, it's wonderful, and it's also, just a great way to expand your lens, you know what I mean, and give
Yes.
you such a bigger canvas. Um,
And maybe
it's just,
it
yeah,
works for both of our books because they are set around the movie industry. And so you are almost being the camera. You're going in close and then you're, doing the wide shot, I guess, in a way.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you feel like, um, I mean, when you were in LA, did you tell people what you were doing? Did you talk to people, like, other than the chateau people? Did you go and do all of,
So
tons of
I
research?
I did. So I went to archives and, I
Did.
wanted to find testimony, interviews, etc., from the women's point of view because,
Yes.
so much of it is from the man's point of view. And I did a couple of studio tours and I chatted to the tour guides about what I was doing. And so I was able to
Yep.
look at a few, like I went into the prop room at Warner Brothers. Have you ever been in there?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that is
Oh
the
my
most
God.
mind blowing place in the world. Like, you can find anything there, bicycles hanging from the ceiling, 7 million lamps and chairs and skulls and plastic
Yeah.
hands and birds' eggs and all the weird
Yes.
stuff. I could have spent the whole day just
I
creeping
know.
around there at the
Did you
amazing
go
stuff. Yeah.
did you go into any of the, they took me into one of the, and I don't think he was very, very nice, this tour guide, who was like, oh, he helped me out, and he took me into one of the unused, um, studios, which was just, it was bare, it was empty, it was about
Yeah,
to be
right.
reset for something else. I
Yep.
don't know what was about to go into there, but it was so much bigger, and more, like, the work that they do to make it a, a world is so intense. I hadn't
Yes.
quite understood that until I saw one that hadn't been,
Mm.
it was really, just, so much more work than I had really kind of grasped. I hadn't
Mm,
realized how little
yes.
they were starting with. Um,
No, and I hadn't realized how many sound stages and how big those sound stages were. And they're massive. It's like a world.
yeah,
There's, 50
yeah,
different worlds all in a row in this
yeah.
lot. Quite incredible.
And
Yeah.
the weirdest thing is that I realized as I was walking around in there that my sort of, you know my kind of touchstone, my kind of core memory of this thing that I kept thinking about was, like, Singing in the Rain. Have you seen
Yes.
the movie Singing in the Rain? And
Yes.
you see the movie, and I was like, oh my God, it is just like this. This is, it is.
Yes.
They do have the giant rain machine that comes in, and the
Yeah.
giant this.
Yeah. Yes.
It
Were you
was.
able to see a sound stage where Catherine had worked?
She was. I'm mostly in the point where she's at RKO,
Yeah.
so
Yes.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it's a little bit trickier, but
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I was able to see places where she'd worked later. Um,
Yeah.
you
Okay.
know,
That
later
would have
in
been
her.
amazing.
I know, I know. I was so tempted to go later into her life, because I was like, and then I'll go to Venice,
Yeah.
to
Oh,
do
yes.
summertime, and then I'll go to, you know, I was like,
I'll have to go there and research. What a shame.
oh no, summer in Venice. No, but it was, because she worked in some great places later
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. She did. Do you have a favorite Catherine Hepburn movie? Like, I really wanted to know after reading the book, which one is your favorite? Which is probably like getting you to choose a favorite child or something.
No,
But
it is because there's some that I had so underestimated until I had done all
yes,
the research. And I see
yeah,
that thing of like she's always playing herself, but she wasn't. She was
mm,
just gifted, and I love bringing up baby. But my favorite
mm,
would probably be Philadelphia Story from this part of her
yeah,
life. From the later part
yes.
of her life, Lion in Winter is just.
Okay.
Have you ever seen it? Oh my God, with Peter
No,
O'Toole.
I haven't, but I'm going to go and watch it now. Okay. I couldn't
And
believe
if you
how much work she put into, getting her accent right. And there's that all those scenes that you give us at the start when she's about to film her first movie, and she is methodically over and over and over again trying to say the thing the right way, and she never gives up, she just keeps trying. And I was
Yeah.
like, wow, that is work ethic.
Yeah.
She was so focused, wasn't she?
Well, she also had no idea what she was doing because she'd come from the state. So
Yeah,
she'd come in, thinking she was going to be able to do this, but she'd never done it in front of a camera.
yeah,
She did her
yeah,
first screen test with her back to the camera because she didn't understand what it was to be acting for the camera. She'd
the
just been acting
camera,
for an audience where
yeah,
it doesn't
yeah,
matter where you are because they're.
yes,
Um, and it's amazing that she got hired, at all.
yes.
And then once she got hired, she set her own price, and she set it for astronomically high. And they still, I
They
mean,
still
she
did
just, I
it.
mean,
That whole
yeah,
section reminded me of, was it Linda Evangelista in the 1980s or 90s who
I
said
don't
that
get
she
out
wouldn't
of
get
bed.
out of bed for, yes. And I was thinking of that when I was reading that part of your book. I was like, yes, go ladies.
Exactly. I mean, so much of what we know about, you know, asking for what you're worth and all of that stuff, we're still all
Yes.
learning those things, or
Yes.
I am still, having to learn those things today. She wasn't. She was like, I am
No.
worth an absolute bomb, and
Yeah.
that's what I'm going to ask for. And she just understood, something feels more valuable if it's more expensive.
Yes.
It's just
Yeah.
it just is, and you can't change it later. So go in at the top, and she did. And this was the Great Depression, you know,
Yeah. I
and
feel
she
like that's the moral I'm going to take with me, is to channel Catherine Hepburn in everything I'm doing from now on. To value myself the way that she did, because that's very extraordinary for a woman at her time to have
at her time.
had that just asked for it straight up,
Yes.
no apologies. If
No
I asked for
apology.
it, I would apologize at the end.
I would
Yeah.
too. And I'm like, why do I do
Why?
that?
Why
But
do we
it's
do that? Yeah.
why do we do that? It's yeah, no,
Yeah.
so many, do you feel like that? Do you feel like you come away learning things from your characters? I feel like I come away learning things that I didn't know, and I do things, differently. And things from not just from the writing, but also from the research. I mean, I take care of my mom
Yes.
who's 89 years old. And Katharine
Yeah.
Hepburn was on her roof shoveling snow off her roof in her late 80s in
Yeah,
Manhattan. You know what I mean?
right.
She was like living,
Wow.
she learned to skateboard in her late 70s. And so with my mom, I'm just like, no, no, I'm not doing it for you. You've got to, come on, you got to brush the dog's teeth. You got to get out there. You got to do, like, so I'm doing things very differently since I started
Yes.
researching about her because
Have you put her
it's
up on the roof to shovel any snow
I have
yet?
not put my octogenarian mother on the roof, but you see pictures of her, like she's shoveling snow off the roof, and she's like
Wow.
86 years old, and I'm like,
That's
holy,
incredible.
yeah. I mean, she
Gosh,
never
I love
stopped
that.
learning, which I find
Yeah.
really interesting. But do you learn things from the people you write? And it must live in your brain somewhere, but you're like, where did that come from? How did I?
Yeah. I know, and people often ask, when you're doing book tour events, what do you want readers to take away from this book? And it's always like, well, but there's also, what do I take away from this book too?
Yeah.
Which is just, but in the case of Aria in The Shadow on Sunset, is I wanted to write about this very ordinary 14-year-old girl who in no set of circumstances would ever be the hero of a story because she's just so ordinary. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, what does it actually take for someone to go, no, I'm no longer going to be this quiet, invisible person. I'm going to claim my voice. And I think I learned
Yes.
from that too. It made me reflect on being back in high school and trying to, I was sort of the smart kid, and that wasn't a valuable commodity back when I was 14 years old. And
No.
no, no. And I remember trying to get answers wrong in tests a couple of times so that my
God,
marks wouldn't be quite as
no.
extraordinary. And, I really reflected on that when I was writing this book, the way in which so many women at different points in their life try to make themselves lesser than or smaller than they are in order to fit into a set of circumstances. And what I got out of that book was, I'm not going to do that anymore. So it's
Yeah.
really fabulous how your characters can teach you things and make us better people, hopefully.
Yeah. How do you
Yeah.
answer when they say, "What do you want people readers to take away?" I never know what to. I mean, I answer something different every time because I am struck by some. Like it's always feels
Yeah.
different. Every event feels
Yep.
there's a
I
different
feel
energy
like
in the room every time.
definitely. That's a really good question. And I'm aware that we're probably nearing our end of
Oh
our
yeah.
time. So maybe we finish up on that one because that'll be a nice
Yes.
one to leave everybody with, I hope. For this one, I always say that what I hope is that because a lot of it's about dreams and how dreams propel us through life. And I think dreams are essential and necessary, and we all need to have them. But a
Yeah.
dream is meaningless unless you take action. And so, what I
Yes.
hope readers take out of this book is that hold your dreams, close to your heart, but don't forget to take the first step of action towards making that dream come true. So, yeah.
Amazing. That's
So, what have you been
fantastic.
saying about the original then? What have you been coming up with?
I mean, I come up with it's always sort of a different thing every time because it's a different audience, it's a different room, but
Yes.
what I feel like is I feel like no two people read the same book. I
Yes.
feel like
So
you meet a
true.
book
Yes.
with you meet a book with your memory and your experience and your sensory experience as well. So different
Mm,
things are going to jump out for every person. So I hope a reader walks away with a feeling of ownership, a feeling of recognition, a
yes.
feeling of found something that rings true, just rings a really hard truth bell for them. And then also, I feel like she was such a trailblazer,
Mm,
and I hope they come away seeing how hard it was for her to get there. It wasn't.
yeah.
She came from a life of so much trauma.
Yeah, she did.
It wasn't an easy ride for her to get there. It was a very hard one.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so those are the two things. But it's always different. I mean, I hope, and also I
Yeah.
just hope you enjoy it. Don't that's
Yeah,
what you most.
absolutely. I mean, that's the bottom line, isn't it? We want them to enjoy the book, but yeah. But here's to
Yeah.
trailblazers like Catherine
Yes,
Hepburn. They're the
absolutely.
best. They make the world go
And
around. It's
I
been so nice chatting to you. I have
love
loved this
to talk
so
to you.
much. Yeah, what a fabulous chat. I hope everyone listening has enjoyed it as well.
Thank you. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you for listening. Please visit alwaysauthors.com to learn about our other episodes. Always Authors is an exclusive production of Atomic Focus Entertainment.